When I first decided to improve my English, I thought I needed to spend hours every day studying, reading, and memorizing. I imagined myself buried in textbooks, practicing endlessly, feeling exhausted but hoping for quick results. And honestly, that thought was intimidating. I wondered, how could I possibly dedicate so much time every single day and still manage school, family, or work? That pressure almost made me give up before I even started. Then, one day, I realized something simple but powerful. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. 30 minutes a day. That was all I promised myself. 30 minutes of focused effort every single day and nothing more. Some days it felt too short, like it wouldn't make any difference, but that tiny commitment began to create a rhythm. I started waking up a little earlier, picking up a short article to read, speaking a few sentences aloud, or listening carefully to a podcast while brushing my teeth. I didn't feel overwhelmed, and that small sustainable habit became a part of my daily life. What surprised me most was how small, consistent actions compounded over time. 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, and after a few weeks, I could notice words I hadn't remembered before. Sentences that once felt complicated started making sense. Listening to native speakers no longer sounded like a foreign language. I could follow along, understand context, and even guess meanings of new words. That's the magic of consistency. It turns tiny efforts into noticeable results. And here's the truth. It's easy to underestimate small steps because they feel insignificant. We often wait for a perfect moment or a huge chunk of time to start learning, thinking, if I can't do it fully, what's the point? But the power lies in showing up every single day, even if it's just for 30 minutes. That commitment builds confidence, discipline, and progress that no intense, sporadic effort can match. Over time, I realized I wasn't just improving my English, I was learning a life lesson. Consistency is a habit, a mindset, a promise to yourself. Every day you show up, no matter how small the effort, you're proving to yourself that growth is possible, one step at a time. And that's why 30 minutes a day changed everything. It wasn't the hours, the intensity, or the pressure. It was the steady daily commitment that truly transformed my English and my confidence. When I started practicing English, I quickly realized that understanding words and grammar wasn't enough. I could read, listen, and even write, but speaking, that was a completely different challenge. My mind knew the sentences, but my tongue refused to cooperate. I was shy, worried about making mistakes, and terrified someone might judge me. And at first, I avoided speaking altogether. I thought I had to wait for the perfect moment, and makes the language feel like a natural part of you. So even if you are shy, even if you feel silly, even if it's just 30 minutes a day, speak. Speak to yourself. Speak to the mirror. Speak while reading and speak while thinking. Every word you say aloud brings you one step closer to fluency. When I began my journey to improve my English, I realized that practicing for 30 minutes a day wasn't enough if my environment didn't support it. I could study grammar, memorize words, and speak aloud. But if I returned to the same routines, the same language habits, and the same surroundings, progress was slow. That's when I discovered the power of immersion, surrounding myself with English in every possible way. At first, it felt overwhelming. I didn't have a native speaking environment, and I didn't have friends who could practice with me all the time. But then I started small. I listened to English songs while doing chores, watched shows with subtitles to connect sounds to meaning, and switched my phone and apps into English so that even daily tasks became practice. I read articles, short stories, and even social media posts in English just to keep my mind thinking in the language naturally. Slowly, English became part of my world, not just part of my study time. Immersion is different from studying. It doesn't feel like homework. It feels like life, flowing naturally, almost without noticing. The more I exposed myself to English, the faster my comprehension improved. I started recognizing words in conversations before I even consciously learned them. I could follow plot lines in shows without subtitles. I could sing along to songs without hesitation. And more important, when I spoke, sentences came out with confidence. Because my mind was already used to hearing and thinking in English. What's beautiful about immersion is that it makes learning enjoyable. It removes the pressure of formal study and replaces it with curiosity and interaction. English stops being a subject and becomes a tool, a way to understand stories, ideas, and people. Even 30 minutes of focused immersion a day compounds over time. It's not just exposure, it's training your brain to think, process, and respond in a new way. Immersing yourself doesn't require perfection. You don't need to understand every word or get every sentence right. The goal is consistency, exposure, and engagement. By surrounding yourself with English, even in small ways, your brain adapts, and learning becomes natural. I realized that this was the turning point in my journey. Once I immersed myself in English, all the other practices, speaking aloud, thinking in English, tracking progress, became easier and more effective. English was no longer a subject I studied. It was a language I lived, breathed, and connected with every day. When I first started practicing English for 30 minutes a day, it was hard to notice progress. Every day felt the same. Learning new words, repeating sentences, trying not to make mistakes. Sometimes it even felt like I wasn't improving at all. I remember feeling frustrated and wondering if all that effort was really making a difference. That's when I realized something crucial. If you don't track your progress, it's easy to feel stuck, even when you're moving forward. So I started keeping a simple record of my journey. I wrote down new words I learned each day, sentences I could speak more confidently, and small victories, like understanding a line in a movie without subtitles, or responding to someone without pausing to translate in my mind. At first, these felt like tiny, almost invisible achievements. But as the days passed, I could look back and see how far I had come. Suddenly, the progress that seemed invisible became undeniable. Tracking progress doesn't just show improvement, it motivates you. When you see that your vocabulary has grown, your pronunciation has improved, or your listening comprehension is sharper, it reinforces your effort. It reminds you that every 30-minute session matters. Every repetition matters. Every attempt matters. It builds confidence and creates momentum, turning practice from a chore into something rewarding. And celebrating wins, no matter how small, is equally important. I learned to pause and acknowledge my efforts. Reading my first full article without looking up words, successfully using a new phrase in a conversation, even understanding a joke in English. Each small win became a source of joy and motivation. Celebrating progress doesn't mean being perfect. It means recognizing that growth is happening, step by step, day by day. Over time, I also started reflecting on challenges. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, I saw them as markers of where I could improve. Tracking progress helped me identify patterns, what I struggled with, what strategies worked best, and how to adjust my practice to be more effective. It gave me clarity and purpose. The lesson is simple. Growth is real, but it needs to be visible. When you track your progress and celebrate wins, learning becomes measurable, encouraging, and meaningful. It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about seeing your own journey unfold, one day at a time. When I first started learning English, mistakes felt like failures. Every mispronounced word, every awkward sentence, every time I stumbled while speaking made me feel embarrassed. I remember stopping myself from trying to speak in front of others because I was scared of being judged. And honestly, that fear slowed me down. I was focusing so much on being perfect that I forgot the purpose of learning, to grow, to communicate, to improve. Then I realized something crucial. Mistakes aren't setbacks, they're lessons. They're evidence that you're stretching beyond your comfort zone and trying something new. Every error I made revealed exactly where I needed to focus my energy. Mispronounced words, showed me which sounds I hadn't mastered. Confusing sentences revealed gaps in my understanding. Instead of avoiding mistakes, I began to welcome them as opportunities to learn. I started changing my mindset. When I made a mistake, I would pause, note what went wrong, and try again. I would repeat the sentence, practice the pronunciation, or rewrite it correctly. Over time, those repeated corrections became improvements. What once felt like failure turned into measurable progress. Mistakes became stepping stones, not obstacles. Embracing mistakes also built confidence. I realized that the more I allowed myself to fail safely, the faster I improved. Speaking with errors in front of friends or teachers no longer felt intimidating. I could laugh, correct myself, and keep going. That freedom to make mistakes removed fear and replaced it with courage. I was no longer held back by self-doubt. Another important lesson was patience. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and mistakes are a natural part of learning. I learned to be kind to myself, to celebrate the effort rather than just the outcome, and to recognize that each mistake was proof that I was practicing, pushing boundaries, and moving forward. And mistakes became reminders of resilience. Each time I stumbled and tried again, I proved to myself that progress isn't linear, but it is real. Learning a language isn't about perfection. It's about persistence, reflection, and adaptation. The mistakes I once feared became the tools that built my fluency and confidence. The truth is, every expert started as a beginner who made countless mistakes. By embracing them instead of fearing them, you transform learning into a journey of discovery rather than a trial of judgment. And that's why embracing mistakes as lessons changed the way I learned English and gave me the courage to keep improving every single day. For a long time, I used to approach English by translating everything from my native language in my mind. Every sentence, every word, every idea had to pass through a filter before it came out. It was slow, exhausting, and often frustrating. By the time I finished translating, the conversation had moved on, or I lost the confidence to speak at all. I realized that this habit was holding me back from true fluency. That's when I made a shift. I decided to think in English, not translate. It wasn't easy at first. My brain was used to relying on my native language as a safety net. But by consciously practicing, I started training myself to process thoughts directly in English. I described my day, imagined conversations, and narrated small actions in English inside my mind. Gradually, it became more natural to form sentences without mentally translating every word. Thinking in English changed everything. Suddenly, speaking became faster and more fluid because I wasn't stopping to decode or convert thoughts. My sentences sounded more natural, and my confidence grew because I was no longer dependent on translation. Listening became easier too. I could follow conversations without constantly pausing to figure out meanings, because my mind was already processing English in real time. One strategy that helped me was surrounding myself with English in context. Reading stories, watching shows, listening to podcasts, and even labeling things around the house forced my brain to associate words with ideas directly. Over time, this practice rewired the way I thought. English was no longer just words on a page or sounds I had to translate. It became a language I could feel, imagine, and use instantly. Another key was patience and persistence. Thinking in English doesn't happen overnight. My mind would often slip back into translation, especially when I was tired or nervous. But each time I caught myself, I reminded myself to try again, to reframe my thoughts directly in English. That small, consistent effort, just like my 30 minutes of daily practice, compounded over time and created lasting fluency. The transformation was profound. By thinking in English, I could express myself freely, engage in conversations without hesitation, and enjoy the language without fear. I realized that fluency isn't just about knowing words or grammar, it's about training your to operate in the language itself.